My son had strictly forbidden me from going to his ranch. But after he died, the lawyer handed me the keys and said, "It's yours now." I was planning to sell it, but out of curiosity, I decided to go see it first. The moment I opened the door, my breath caught in my throat because inside was, "I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it's reached." I sat in the large church downtown, the frigid air seeming to seep right into my bones. The intense scent of white lilies enveloped me, mixing with the unbearable weight of a nameless sorrow. That day was the funeral for Alex, my only son. The church was packed. Friends, colleagues, relatives, both distant and close, all with their heads bowed, their eyes red, their lips pressed tight. They had come to say goodbye, to give their final farewell to a man I had dedicated my entire life to loving and protecting. But me, I was just there, as rigid as a stone statue in the front row, next to my daughter-in-law Marcela and my granddaughter Camila. I forced back my tears, clenching my jaw to keep from screaming. I am a mother. I had to be strong, even though my heart was breaking into a million pieces. Marcela sat beside me crying until her voice was gone. Her sobs echoed through the church as if trying to tear apart the deathly silence. I didn't blame her. How could I? She had just lost her husband, the man she'd shared so many years with. But when I looked at Camila, my granddaughter, a sharp pain shot through my chest. The girl, 15 and slender, kept her head down while her fingers moved restlessly across her phone screen. She wasn't crying. She wasn't talking. She was just lost in a total silence, as if trying to escape this cruel reality. I wanted to hug her, to say something to comfort her, but my throat closed up. I didn't even know where to begin, when I myself still didn't understand why Alex had left so suddenly. After the ceremony, my in-laws, Arthur and Eugenia, took charge of greeting the guests. Dressed elegantly with courteous gestures, there was something in the way they commanded the situation that made me feel out of place. As if I were just another guest, a stranger at my own son's funeral. Arthur shook each person's hand, murmuring words of thanks, but his eyes remained cold, without a trace of emotion. Eugenia, at his side in an impeccable outfit, smiled with a distant politeness. I stood there watching them, wondering why I felt so alien. He was my son, my blood, and yet it felt like I didn't belong there. A few days later, when I thought I could bury my grief in daily routines, a call from Mr. Ramirez, the lawyer, plunged me back into the abyss. "Mrs. Isabel, I'd like you to come to my office. It's important." His voice, deep and serious on the other end of the line, sounded as if it held a secret I wasn't ready for. I drove to his office with my hands gripping the steering wheel, my heart heavy. The atmosphere in his office was suffocating. The smell of old paper and waxed wood tightened my chest. He sat behind his desk and pushed a thick brown envelope toward me. "This is Alex's will," he said in a monotone voice, as if reading a report. I opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were cold legal documents and an old metal key, its surface dull and worn by time. Mr. Ramirez began to read the will, each word stabbing my chest like a knife. Alex was leaving me full ownership of a property called Maple Creek Ranch. That name froze me in place. Maple Creek. The same name Alex had repeated for years with a serious face, with an almost pleading look. "Mom, I'm begging you, never go there." I didn't understand. Why? Why would he leave me a place he himself forbade me from ever visiting? And why, on such a crucial day, was Marcela, his wife, Camila's mother, not present? My throat tightened as if someone was squeezing it. I looked at Mr. Ramirez, hoping he would say something to explain, but he just shook his head, saying he didn't know anything more than what was written in the will. I left the office with heavy steps, the cold key in my hand seeming to whisper something I couldn't yet understand. On the way home, I glanced in the rearview mirror and jumped. A black SUV was following me, all the way from the lawyer's office to the street near my house. I tried to calm down, telling myself I was probably mistaken, but my heart was pounding. The vehicle only turned off onto another street when I was close to home, leaving me with a sense of unease I couldn't shake. That night, I sat alone in the living room, the dim yellow light illuminating the family photos on the wall. The house was so quiet it was frightening, only the constant ticking of the clock serving as a reminder that time didn't stop, even though it had for my son forever. I opened the envelope, took out the key, and studied it. It was small, but it felt as heavy as if it carried a history I never knew. The memories came flooding back, as clear as if it were yesterday. Alex, a 10-year-old boy with messy curly hair and big brown eyes, holding my hand tightly on a rainy afternoon. "Mom, I hate Maple Creek," he'd said in a trembling voice. "Never go there, okay? Only bad things are there." I had smiled, stroking his head, thinking it was just a childhood fear, but that look in his eyes, so intense, now returned to my memory, sharp and painful. One morning before dawn, I decided I had to find the answers for myself. I left the house quietly without telling anyone, not even Teresa, my sister. Teresa had always been there for me in tough times, but this time I wanted to face it alone. I was afraid that if I talked about it, I'd lose my nerve. I drove along winding roads, leaving the city behind, heading for Maple Creek. The farther I went, the colder the air became, as if the land itself were trying to warn me. The path leading to the ranch narrowed, overgrown with weeds that scraped against the tires. I had to grip the steering wheel tightly to stay on the road. In the distance, an old wooden sign appeared, the words Maple Creek Ranch barely visible, almost hidden among the thick branches. I stopped, my heart pounding against my ribs. This was the place Alex didn't want me to come to. And yet, here I was, right in front of it. The iron gate stood imposing, rusted and heavy, like a wall separating the past from the present. The lock looked solid, covered in dust and cobwebs. I took out the key Alex had left, my hand shaking so much I almost dropped it. As I inserted it, I held my breath. A dry click broke the morning silence. I pushed the gate, and the screech of rusted metal sounded like the wail of a forgotten soul. A shiver ran down my spine, making me tremble. I told myself, "Isabel, don't be afraid. Do it for Alex." But my feet felt like lead as I crossed the threshold. I drove in, the dirt road stretching ahead, flanked by surprisingly green pastures. I had always imagined Maple Creek as a ruin, just as Alex had described it. But it wasn't. In the distance I saw wooden stables, new and carefully restored. The neighing of horses echoed, strong and alive, as if trying to awaken the entire land. I could see a few people working, their sleeves rolled up, carrying sacks of feed. This ranch wasn't abandoned. It was alive. It was breathing, as if someone had been secretly taking care of it all these years. The main house appeared at the end of the drive, old but meticulously cared for. The white paint was fresh, the windows gleamed, and the red tile roof looked brand new. I was stunned. This was not the image of a cursed place from Alex's fearful memories. I parked the car and got out, my shoes sinking into the soft earth, a wave of confusion washing over me. I had braced myself for a place in ruins, but what stood before me looked like a dream built with love and precision. I pushed open the heavy wooden door, my heart hammering, not knowing what awaited me inside. Inside, the air was warm, full of life. The scent of polished wood and flowers floated gently, surprising me. On the walls hung paintings of horses, each stroke full of vitality, as if they could leap out of the frames. In the corners stood detailed wood-carved sculptures, each one showcasing the care put into them. A red Persian rug stretched across the floor, soft under my feet. I walked on, feeling like I was entering a house that wasn't mine, yet felt strangely familiar. In a corner, I saw a room decorated as a library, with shelves reaching the ceiling filled with old leather-bound books. Next to it was a small painting studio, with an easel, watercolors, and an unfinished painting of the Maple Creek Valley. I stood motionless, staring at the still wet brush strokes, as if Alex had just left it there yesterday. And then I saw it, the gleaming black piano in the living room, shining in the sunlight, streaming through the window. On top of it was an old photo frame, Alex and me when he was just 8 years old. A boy with a radiant smile, hugging me on a summer afternoon. Tears welled up in my eyes, impossible to hold back. "Alex, what did you do here?" I whispered, my voice breaking. Everything in this house seemed arranged not for a new owner, but for the return of a loved one. I felt my son's presence in every corner, in every object. But why? Why did he hide this place from me? Why did he forbid me from coming, only to leave it all to me in the end? I walked down the hallway with a heavy heart. Many of the wooden doors along the sides were locked without a crack to peer through. I tried to open one, but it wouldn't budge. What secrets were hidden behind these doors? I wanted to break them down, to scream to release my helplessness, but I just stood there, my hand on the cold wood. I returned to the living room, my gaze falling on the large oak table in the center. On it, a silver laptop was carefully placed, and next to it, a freshly bloomed red rose, still sparkling with dewdrops. I froze. That rose was like a message, as if someone knew I was coming and was waiting for me. I took a deep breath and opened the computer. The screen lit up immediately. No password, nothing. A video was already queued up, as if waiting for me. Alex appeared on the screen. My son, thinner than I remembered. His face gaunt, but his eyes still warm. The same eyes that looked at me when he would curl up in my lap on rainy days. He was wearing a white shirt and was in a room I recognized instantly. His small home office, with its messy shelves and a landscape painting hanging crookedly on the wall. "Mom," Alex's calm voice said, though each word was like a stab to my heart, "if you're seeing this, it means I'm no longer in this world." My whole world stopped. I felt the blood freeze in my veins, the air catch in my chest. I wanted to scream, to smash the screen to stop Alex from speaking, but I stayed there, motionless, as tears streamed down my face in silence. Alex looked directly at the lens, as if he were looking at me, right here, right now. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, his voice hoarse. "I didn't want you to have to go through this, but I don't have another choice." He began to explain, in a flat tone heavy with pain, about the hereditary heart condition passed down from his late father, my husband, who left us when Alex was just 10. About the consultation 3 years ago, when Dr. Cardona, an old family friend, called him into his office and gave him a diagnosis that was like a death sentence. "The doctor said I only had 2 to 5 years left," Alex said, holding up a thick medical file. He flipped through the pages one by one, pointing to scribbles and hospital stamps. "I got checked so many times by different doctors. They all said the same thing. I didn't want you and Marcella to live out my last days in anguish and fear. I wanted everything to be normal, as if nothing was wrong." I covered my face, tears seeping through my fingers. My son, the one I raised, the one I loved more than myself, had hidden such an enormous secret from me. I remembered his smiles, the family dinners when he'd tell jokes and play with Camilla. It was all a facade. He was carrying death inside him, and I, his mother, had no idea. I felt like I had failed, like I didn't deserve to be a mother. "Why, Alex?" I whispered, my voice broken. "Why didn't you tell your mom?" Suddenly a creak echoed from the hallway, shattering the silence. The white curtain on the window billowed violently, pushed by the wind. I jumped, my heart pounding in my chest, and ran to shut the window. The cold air rushed in as if trying to drag me out of this nightmare. I slammed it shut, my hands trembling, and returned to the chair. But when I sat down, the previous video was gone. Another one played automatically, and this time Alex's gaze was no longer warm. He stared intently at the camera, his eyes filled with a strange weight, as if trying to say something before it was too late. "Mom," he said in a rushed whisper, "there's something more terrifying than death, I think. I think someone wants my time to come sooner." I recoiled without thinking, the chair scraping softly against the wooden floor. Cold sweat trickled down my temples, running down my cheek. Alex's words were like needles piercing my heart. "Poisoned? Who? Why?" I looked around the room, and the sunlight streaming through the window suddenly felt icy. Everything in that house, the paintings, the piano, the red rose, took on a different, threatening meaning. I wanted to run, to escape this place, but my legs felt rooted to the floor. At that moment, a silhouette appeared in the front doorway. I flinched, nearly screamed, but then I recognized Camilla. The girl stood there, her hair disheveled, her eyes red, looking at me with a mix of worry and fear. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I followed you this morning. Why did you come all the way out here alone?" I was flustered, snapping the laptop shut as if to hide the terrible truth I had just heard. "Camilla, what are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, though my heart was racing. "I told you to stay home." "I couldn't," Camilla said, stepping inside, her hands clenched. "I saw you leave early this morning and I got worried about you. You've been acting strange since Dad's funeral." She paused, looking around the house, her eyes wide. "What is this place, Grandma? Why did Dad leave it to you?" I didn't know how to answer her. How could I tell my granddaughter that her father suspected someone wanted to harm him? That this place, Maple Creek, wasn't just a ranch, but a secret that even I didn't fully understand. I pulled her to me, hugged her, feeling her small body tremble. "I just want to understand more about your dad," I said, my voice hoarse. "Get some rest, sweetheart. Everything's going to be okay." But I knew I was lying. Nothing was okay. I led her inside, asked her to sit on the sofa, and poured her a glass of water. She looked at me with eyes full of questions, and I just forced a smile, trying to hide the fear growing inside me. I wanted to protect her, to shield her from what I had just heard, but I knew I couldn't keep this secret forever. The brief calm was shattered by the roar of engines at the entrance. I stepped out onto the porch and saw a caravan of cars approaching slowly. Several gleaming Mercedes sedans pulled up in front of the steps, kicking up a cloud of dust that enveloped me in a sense of unease. The first door opened and Arthur stepped out. Marcella's father, wearing an expensive black suit, his face frozen, showing no emotion. Behind him came Eugenia, Marcella's mother, in a long gray coat, her sharp eyes scanning the ranch as if she were appraising merchandise. Beside her was a man with salt and pepper hair, a thick briefcase under his arm, his gaze as piercing as a hawk's. I recognized him immediately, a lawyer, the kind you know is here to cause trouble just by looking at him. "Mrs. Isabel," Arthur said, his voice deep and flat, devoid of emotion, like someone passing a sentence. "We need to talk. This ranch, it doesn't belong to you." His words hit me like a punch to the chest. I froze, my throat tight, unable to say anything for a few seconds. "What?" I finally managed to stammer, my voice trembling but trying to sound firm. "That's clearly written in my son's will. Alex left Maple Creek to me. You have no right to be here." Eugenia smirked, a cold, bitter sneer, as if I'd said something foolish. "Paper is just paper, ma'am," she replied, her voice soft but laced with venom. "The law can be bent in many ways if one knows how." She took a step forward, and the click of her heels on the brick floor echoed like a challenge. Camilla, who was behind me, suddenly stepped forward, her eyes wide, staring at her grandparents. "What are you talking about?" she said, her voice shaking with rage. "This was my dad's. He left it to my grandma, not you." I grabbed her hand and pulled her back towards me, trying to stop her from saying more. I didn't want her caught in the crossfire, but her look, filled with pain and confusion, pierced my heart. The gray-haired lawyer stepped forward and placed his briefcase on the wooden porch table. He opened it, took out a stack of papers, and spread them out like he was dealing a hand of cards. "Mrs. Isabel," he said in a monotone but sharp voice, "I am Mr. Vargas, representing Mrs. Marcella's family. These are old property contracts, signed before Alex drafted his will. We have proof that this ranch belonged to an investment fund to which Mrs. Marcella's family contributed capital for many years. Young Alex's will, I'm afraid, will not hold much weight in court." I stared at the papers, the crooked letters and red seals, but everything was a blur. "You're lying," I said, my voice hardening, though I was a mess inside. "Alex never mentioned any investment fund. You think I'm going to believe this?" Mr. Vargas smiled, a faint, humorless smile. "You may not believe it, but the court will. A long, expensive lawsuit will make you lose everything, not just this ranch. We just want you to understand that backing down is your best option." I felt the blood rush to my head, burning. Back down? I nearly shouted, unable to contain myself any longer. You think I'm going to abandon what my son left me just because of some threats? You have no idea who I am. But even as I said it, I felt the helplessness growing inside me. They hadn't just come to talk. They had come to declare war. Arthur looked at me, the corner of his mouth lifting into a cruel smile. There are things you don't need to know, Mrs. Isabel, he said in a voice so deep it sent shivers down my spine. Just remember one thing. Don't you ever mess with this place. He turned, the sound of his leather shoes on the tile floor echoing like hammer blows. Eugenia and Mr. Vargas followed without a backward glance. They got into their cars, the doors slammed shut, and the convoy drove off, leaving a cloud of dust behind. I stood there motionless, watching the cars until they disappeared. Then I saw it, a fleeting glimpse, the black SUV, identical to the one that followed me that day from the lawyer's office. It was parked in the distance near the iron gate, like a phantom watching in silence. A chill ran down my spine. They had been watching me from the beginning, ever since I took Alex's key into my hands. They knew I would come here. They were waiting for me. Grandma, what do they want? Camilla tugged on my hand, her voice filled with panic, her eyes wide with fear. I looked at her, wanting to say something to comfort her, but my throat felt tight. How could I explain that her maternal grandparents were trying to snatch her father's inheritance? How could I tell her that I myself didn't fully understand what was happening? I just squeezed Camilla's hand, pulled her close, and whispered, "From now on, you can't take your eyes off me for a second. Promise me, okay?" The girl nodded, but I saw the confusion in her eyes. I led her back into the house, trying to hide the fear that was screaming inside me. In the silent house, the laptop screen was still on, Alex's video not yet finished. I sat down, my trembling hands turning the machine back on, but I didn't dare to keep watching. Alex's last words still echoed in my head. Someone wants my time to come sooner. Who? Aso? Eugenia? Or someone else, hiding in the shadows that were following me? I stood frozen on the porch, my gaze fixed on the dusty road where Arthur's convoy had just disappeared. I hugged Camilla, trying to hide the trembling that coursed through me, but the girl's eyes, full of worry, were on me, as if wanting to ask something I wasn't ready to answer. "Mrs. Isabel?" Suddenly a deep, raspy voice came from the stables, pulling me from my restless daze. I turned with a start. A man in his 60s, thin, with a weathered face, was approaching. He wore a worn cowboy hat, and his deep-set eyes reflected a sorrow that was hard to name. "I'm Ellis," he introduced himself, his voice slow, as if each word was carefully considered. "I'm the foreman of this ranch. Mr. Alex hired me 3 years ago." I looked at him with suspicion. After what had happened with Arthur and Eugenia, I didn't know who I could trust. But Ellis just smiled, a melancholic smile, as if he understood the doubt in my eyes. "The young man saved me from prison," he said, his gaze lost in a painful memory. "I owe him my life. You have nothing to fear from me." His words, sincere and calm, made me pause. Looking into his eyes, I saw a loyalty I hadn't seen in anyone since Alex was gone. "Thank you, Ellis," I replied, my voice breaking. "But why are you here? Alex never told me about you." Ellis nodded as if expecting the question. "He didn't want you to know too much, Mrs. Isabel. He wanted to protect you." He paused, looked at Camilla, then back at me. "But now that you're here, I think you have a right to know the truth." He took us on a tour of the stables, where 6 magnificent horses were being meticulously cared for. Each one had a name tied to a memory of Alex: Sun, Moon, Star, and Midnight, the black horse that immediately captivated Camilla. The girl stroked his glossy coat, her eyes lighting up for the first time since the funeral. "Grandma, this horse is just like the one Dad always told stories about," she exclaimed excitedly. I smiled, though my heart ached. "Alex, my son, you built a whole world here, and your mother never knew." "Did Alex come here often?" I asked Ellis, trying to stay calm while my insides were a whirlwind. "Almost every month, ma'am," he answered, petting another horse. He'd repair the stable with his own hands. He'd personally supervise the workers building the greenhouse. He didn't trust anyone, except for a very select few. He stopped, looking at me seriously, as if he wanted to say something more profound. Mr. Alex loved this place, but he also feared it. He used to say Maple Creek was both his dream and his nightmare. Ellis's words were like another stab to my heart. I felt pain, but also pride in my son, Alex, the son who hid a serious illness from me, who hid an entire world he had built here. I wanted to ask more, to dig into what Ellis knew, but his gaze stopped me. "Did you know?" He lowered his voice, glancing around cautiously as if afraid someone was listening. "That Alex left you more than just a few videos?" I was stunned, my heart pounding. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, my voice trembling. Camilla looked at me, then at Ellis, her eyes filled with curiosity but also worry. Ellis didn't answer right away. He motioned for Camilla and me to follow him, leading us out of the stable, across a grassy yard, to an old barn at the edge of the property. The barn looked like it had been abandoned for a long time. The wooden planks were rotten, the tin roof rusted. Ellis pulled a rusty iron key from his pocket and opened the heavy door. The hinges shrieked like a warning. "Follow me," he said in a low voice. "Be careful on the steps." I gripped Camilla's hand tightly and followed Ellis inside. The interior was dark, filled with a musty smell. Ellis slid a floorboard to the side, revealing a secret passage leading down to a basement. I froze, my heart thundering. "What is this, Ellis?" I asked, my voice catching. Camilla squeezed my hand hard, her breathing quickening. "Alex called it his safe place," Ellis said, holding an old flashlight whose weak beam lit the narrow passage. "You need to see what he left. But I'm warning you, what's down there? It could change everything." When we reached the bottom of the stairs, Ellis raised the flashlight, illuminating the entire room. I gasped. This was no ordinary basement. The walls were reinforced with solid concrete, like a military bunker. On them hung geological maps, detailed land surveys and satellite photographs, carefully pinned up. In the center of the room was a long table, covered with files, external hard drives, and modern computer equipment, the screens dark, but looking ready to be turned on. I felt my heart pound violently, as if I had stepped into a secret world that Alex had built underground. "Alex called it the war room," Ellis said, his voice low but firm, his eyes scanning the place as if to make sure no one was listening. He knew his wife's family would make a move one day, and he prepared for it. Trembling, I approached the table and touched the first file. It was thick with pages full of numbers, signatures, and legal seals. Land purchase agreements, along with reports from 3 independent oil exploration companies. I flipped through the pages, my vision blurring as I read each line. The land at Maple Creek, which I had always believed was barren, was actually sitting on a massive oil deposit. Its value wasn't in the millions, but in the billions. I looked up at Ellis, a lump in my throat. "Alex knew this?" "He didn't just know," Ellis replied, his voice low as if telling a painful story. "He fought to keep it. He didn't want to sell. He didn't want it to fall into anyone's hands. He said Maple Creek was a legacy, not just for you, but for Camilla too." My heart felt like it was being squeezed. Alex, my son, had been silently fighting the whole world, carrying a fatal heart condition, and yet he never said a word to me. I felt pride and pain at the same time. But when I opened the second file, my world fell apart. It was a lab report, accompanied by photos of strange, tiny, opaque white pills. The conclusion, in bold letters, nearly made me collapse. The food sample tested positive for a high dose of a cardiac stimulant, which can be fatal in patients with a history of heart problems. The image of Marcella flashed in my mind, as clear as a movie. The loving wife who prepared Alex's food with her own hands every day, always smiling sweetly as she placed his plate in front of him. I remembered the times I'd go to their house and see Marcella chopping vegetables, making soups as if it were her way of showing love. But now every memory was like a knife. I stumbled back, clutching my chest, feeling like someone was crushing my heart. "It can't be," I whispered, my voice broken. "Marcella, it can't be her." Ellis looked at me with pity in his eyes. Mr. Alex didn't want to believe it either, he said. But he started to get suspicious and began checking everything. He sent food samples to the lab and the result is what you see. I shook my head, tears welling up and streaming down my cheeks. I didn't want to believe. I couldn't believe that the woman Alex loved, Camilla's mother, could do something like this. But the proof was right there, cold and undeniable. I glanced at Camilla, who was in the corner of the room, staring at a map, but I knew she was holding back her confusion. I wanted to protect her, to keep her away from this horrible truth, but I didn't know where to start. Ellis walked over to a small metal box on the table, opened it, and took out a red USB drive. Mr. Alex left this, he said, plugging the drive into the computer. The screen flickered to life, and several short videos appeared, recorded in the last months of Alex's life. I sat in the chair, my hands shaking as the first video began to play. Alex appeared, sitting in this very basement, the dim light of a lamp illuminating his gaunt face. "Mom," his voice cracked, "if you found this place, it means my gut feeling was right. Someone is poisoning me. I don't know if it's for money or out of hate, but Mom, you have to be very careful." Tears streamed down my face, dripping onto my clenched hand. Alex's voice, weak but firm, pierced my heart. I wanted to scream, to run and hug him, but he was just an image on a screen, a message from the other side. I looked at Ellis and, with a trembling voice, asked, "Why didn't my son tell me? Why did he have to bear this alone?" Ellis lowered his head, as if he too carried a heavy burden. "He said you were all he had. He didn't want you to live in fear. He didn't want you to have to face those people." Suddenly, a red alert flashed on the computer screen. "Remote access attempt on external drive." Ellis went pale, quickly yanking the power cord from the wall, and the screen went black. He whispered urgently, They know we've been in here." My heart stopped. "Who are they?" I asked, but Ellis just shook his head, his eyes filled with worry. He motioned for us to leave, and I pulled Camilla along, rushing up the stairs. The musty smell still clung to me, but now it was mixed with fear. When we emerged from the barn, the deep red of the sunset covered the ranch, but it brought no warmth. It felt like a warning. Camilla grabbed my arm, her voice hurried. "Grandma, what's going on? Why did Dad say that?" Her eyes were glistening with fear and confusion, as if begging for an answer I couldn't yet give her. I wrapped my arm tightly around her shoulders, my voice hoarse. "You'll know the truth one day. But not now, sweetie." I didn't want her to know that her father might have been poisoned, that the world she had always trusted was now filled with shadows. Leaving that basement, I knew there was no turning back. Maple Creek wasn't just land. It was my son's legacy, his blood and his effort. I wasn't going to let people like Arthur and Eugenia take the last thing Alex left me. I called Mr. Ramirez that night, my voice shaky but firm. "I need your help," I said, getting straight to the point. "I have evidence, and I want to take this to court. They can't steal Maple Creek." Ramirez arrived at the ranch the next morning, carrying a worn leather briefcase and a serious expression. He sat at the dining table in the main house, reviewing the documents I brought from the basement one by one, examining every video on the red USB drive. His face grew harder with each passing moment, his brow furrowed. "This evidence is very strong, Mrs. Isabel," he said in a grave tone. "The lab reports, Alex's videos, Ellis's testimony, we have grounds to fight. But I must warn you, our opponents are not easy. Arthur's family has money, power, and a team of lawyers ready to twist everything." I nodded, though an icy chill ran through me. "I don't care how powerful they are," I replied, with a firmness that surprised me. "I just want justice for my son." Ramirez looked at me with a flicker of compassion, but said nothing more, just nodding and promising to prepare everything for the trial. On the day of the trial, I walked into the courtroom with a heavy heart but steady steps. Camilla squeezed my hand, her little hand trembling, but she didn't let go. Ellis walked behind us, silent as a guardian, his gaze sharp, as if ready to face any threat. I looked around the room at the cold gray walls and the benches filled with people, and felt like I was entering a battle arena. On the other side, Marcella sat with her parents, the three of them exuding power and defiance. Arthur wore a sleek black suit, his gaze as cold as a knife. Eugenia sat ramrod straight in a shimmering silk shawl, the faint smile on her lips dripping with arrogance. Behind them stood Attorney Lopez, a notorious fox in the legal world, who shot me a haughty look as if I were nothing more than easy prey. The trial began, and every second felt like a stab wound. Ramirez stood and presented the evidence with clarity and conviction. He showed the USB with Alex's videos, the reports on the analyzed food, and Ellis's testimony about how Alex had secretly built the war room to protect Maple Creek. I watched the judge, hoping he would see the truth, that he would understand my son had been betrayed, that he had fought to his last breath to defend this legacy. But then Attorney Lopez stood up and all my hope crumbled. He refuted every piece of evidence with a chilling sharpness. "These videos could be edited," he said with a sarcastic tone, waving his hand theatrically. "We have no way to verify their authenticity." He turned to the lab report and smirked. "This result doesn't prove who administered the substance. It only shows the presence of something, but there is no concrete evidence linking it to anyone in particular." I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms, trying to contain my rage. But Lopez didn't stop. He continued, his voice monotone but laced with venom. "Maple Creek was an asset acquired before Alex married Mrs. Marcella. However, Mrs. Marcella lived with him and contributed to that marriage. By law, she has a rightful claim to that property." He looked at me, his eyes seeming to say I didn't stand a chance. Then Arthur stood, his voice booming with authority, like a king delivering a verdict. "Your Honor," he said, "our family supported Alex financially for many years. We paid off his debts. We helped him build his career. We cannot allow all that effort to fall into the hands of a stranger like Mrs. Isabel." His words were a knife straight to the heart. A stranger? Me, Alex's mother, who brought him into this world and raised him, being called a stranger? They even brought in a witness, a middle-aged man with a messy mustache, who testified that he had signed a contract to buy land with Alex, but it was cancelled for no reason. "He was acting strangely," he said dramatically. I don't think he was in his right mind at the time. I wanted to scream that it was a lie, that my Alex was always lucid and careful, but I could only sit there, helpless, watching them twist the truth. Lopez delivered the final blow. Alex was suffering from a severe heart condition. His decisions in the final stage of his life are not reliable. How can this court trust a will made by someone on the verge of death? He looked at me with a twisted, triumphant smile. Camilla shot up from her seat, her voice trembling but full of anger. "My dad was perfectly lucid. I can testify. I know what he did for the ranch." But the judge raised his hand, cutting her off with a stern voice. "Child, you are not old enough to testify. Sit down." Camilla looked at me, tears streaming down her cheeks, and I could only pull her against my chest, holding her tight, trying to hide the desperation that was choking me. The hearing ended with a provisional ruling in their favor. The judge declared that the management of Maple Creek would be temporarily handed over to Marcella pending the final trial. I felt the floor give way beneath me. I had brought all the evidence, the whole truth about Alex, and still it wasn't enough. I looked over at Marcella, hoping to find a trace of the daughter-in-law I once cared for. But she just sat there, her expression blank as if I didn't exist. I left the courtroom with my legs feeling like they were tied to stones. The silence was so intense it was frightening. The only sounds were my shoes striking the wooden floor and the loud thumping of my heart. The judge's ruling echoed in my head. Temporary management of Maple Creek was in Marcella's hands. Those words were like a stab wound, shattering all the hope I had placed in this battle. I had brought all of Alex's evidence, the videos, the analysis reports, Ellis's testimony, but it wasn't enough. I felt as if I had betrayed my son, as if I were letting him go for a second time. In the hallway, Arthur and Eugenia approached, triumphant smiles on their faces that they made no effort to hide. Arthur leaned in, his voice a cold, sharp whisper. "You see, Isabel, we told you, you can't win." I looked him straight in the eye, wanting to scream, wanting to strike that arrogant face, but I just stood there motionless, a bitter lump in my throat. Eugenia stepped forward, her silk robe rustling, her voice sweet but venomous. "You'd be wise to stay quiet. Don't try to fight for what isn't yours." Her words were like salt in an open wound, making me want to scream that Maple Creek belonged to Alex, to my son, not to them. Marcella walked past me, her gaze empty, without a hint of compassion. I looked at her, the daughter-in-law I once loved and considered a daughter, and felt my heart break. How could she sit there silently while I fought for her husband's legacy? How could she let her parents turn me into a stranger? I wanted to call out to her to ask her why, but before I could open my mouth, Camilla let go of my hand, her voice breaking with tears. "Mom, why did you do that to Dad?" Her question was a knife straight to the heart. Camilla ran to her mother, her small shoulders trembling, but Marcella only looked at the child, said nothing, and then turned to follow Arthur and Eugenia. I stood there, helpless, watching my granddaughter run after a mother I no longer recognized. Every step Camilla took plunged me deeper into the abyss of despair. I wanted to run after her, to hold her, to tell her everything would be okay, but I knew I couldn't. Not now, when I didn't even understand what was happening myself. Ellis appeared at my side, gently placing a hand on my trembling arm. "Don't you fall apart, ma'am," he said, his voice low and firm. "Mr. Alex must have had something else prepared. We haven't lost yet." I looked at him, his eyes filled with determination, but I couldn't feel any hope. I just nodded, biting my lip to hold back the tears. Ellis led me out of the hallway, through the crowd of journalists surrounding us, their flashes popping non-stop, blinding me. They shouted questions, their voices a noisy swarm. "Mrs. Isabel, what do you think of the ruling? Will you continue the dispute?" I didn't answer, just lowered my head and walked out into the freezing rain. The rain soaked my clothes, chilling me to the bone, but all I felt was emptiness. I walked step by step, like a machine, with no idea where I was going. Ellis walked silently beside me, holding an umbrella over me, but I didn't want protection. I wanted the rain to wash everything away, the pain, the helplessness, and the shame that was drowning me. I had lost not just to Arthur and Eugenia, but to myself. I had promised Alex, promised Camilla, that I would protect Maple Creek, but now I had nothing left but a shattered heart. That night, I returned to the main house at Maple Creek, not to my own home in the city. I didn't want to face the familiar walls where Alex's laughter once echoed. I sat in the library, among the books my son adored, the dim yellow light illuminating the old leather bindings. I touched a book, my fingers brushing the embossed letters on the cover, and my tears fell. "Alex, I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice hoarse. I tried, but I wasn't strong enough. I sat there motionless, letting despair wash over me. The image of Camilla screaming at her mother, Marcella's empty stare, and Arthur's triumphant smile played in my mind like a movie on a loop, tormenting my thoughts. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the library window. I was still there, still in yesterday's clothes, my eyes swollen from a sleepless night. Suddenly the doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. I dragged myself to the door, and there stood Teresa, my sister. She was there, her graying hair pulled back, her eyes so full of concern, I almost believed she genuinely cared. "Sister, I heard," Teresa said, her voice thick with outrage. "I can't believe they were so shameless, that they dared to snatch Maple Creek from you. Don't worry, I'll be by your side." She came closer, hugged me, and for a moment I felt a sliver of comfort. Teresa, the sister I grew up with, who I shared the hard days with after my husband died, was now here, like one last pillar of support. I led her inside, inviting her to sit on the living room sofa. Camilla was upstairs, asleep after a night of crying. I told Teresa what had happened, the trial, the dismissed evidence, the arrogance of Arthur and Eugenia, but I kept the most sensitive details to myself. The war room, the toxicology report, and Alex's final message. Not because I didn't trust Teresa, but because I was afraid that telling her too much would put her in danger. "I don't know what to do now," I said in a dull voice. "But I'm not giving up. Alex deserves justice." Teresa took my hand, her eyes filled with empathy. "You're so strong," she said. "Alex would be proud of you. I'll help you no matter what." Her words were like a balm, soothing some of my pain. I thought that at least I still had someone to lean on, someone who understood me, who understood how much Maple Creek meant to Alex. But then during lunch, everything changed. I got up to go to the other room to call Ramirez, to ask about the next step in our legal battle. As I passed the hallway, I caught a glimpse of Teresa at the table, secretly typing a message. The phone screen glowed, and before she could hastily hide it, I read a single sentence. "She still doesn't know anything else. Awaiting orders." I felt my heart stop. I stood frozen, rooted to the spot. Teresa, my sister, with whom I had shared so many joys and sorrows, who was she texting? And who else could she be if not me? I pretended I hadn't seen anything, went into the room, closed the door, and called Ramirez. I tried to keep my voice normal, talking about preparing the appeal, but my mind was spinning around Teresa. How was it possible? How could my own sister betray me? I remembered the times she had asked me about Maple Creek, about Alex's will, questions that seemed harmless at the time, but now echoed with suspicion. I felt the ground crumble beneath my feet all over again. That afternoon, Ellis came to see me, his face tense. "Mrs. Isabel," he murmured, leading me to a secluded corner near the stables. The security cameras on the ranch were accessed remotely. Some important video files in the basement were deleted. He paused, looking at me with worried eyes. "Someone knows we were in there. Someone is watching us." I felt my blood run cold. Everything started to click into place. The black SUV following me, Arthur's threats, and now Teresa's message. I looked at Ellis, my voice trembling. "Do you think that someone in my own family is working for them?" Ellis didn't answer immediately, but his expression said it all. He just gave a slight nod, as if he had suspected it for some time. That night, I decided to test Teresa. I couldn't live with the doubt that was eating me alive. While we were having dinner, I spoke in a deliberately casual tone. "Teresa, I found something in the library today. One of Alex's notebooks with important evidence. I think it could change the outcome of the trial." I watched her, saw her gaze flicker for a second before she smiled. "Really, that's great news. You have to keep it safe." But I knew I wasn't mistaken. A few hours later, after leaving Teresa alone in the house, I hid in the garden, concealed by the shadows. Through the window, I saw her whispering on the phone, her voice low but brushed. "I'll definitely get it tomorrow. I'll find a way." My heart shattered. I leaned back against a tree, feeling my whole world collapse. Teresa, my own flesh and blood, whom I trusted more than anyone, was a spy for the enemy. I wanted to scream, to run in and confront her, but I knew I couldn't. Not yet, not without enough proof. I went back into the house, pretending nothing had happened. Teresa smiled at me, but that smile now only sent shivers down my spine. "Are you okay?" she asked sweetly. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Fine. Just tired." But inside I felt betrayed again, more deeply than any pain before. I had already lost Alex. I had lost my trust in Marcela. And now even Teresa, my last family tie, had turned her back on me. 2 weeks passed in an endless nightmare. I lived in a state of tension and uncertainty, every day preparing for the final trial, hoping that this time the truth about Alex would come to light. Attorney Ramirez and I worked tirelessly, reviewing every detail of the expert reports, every second of Alex's videos and Ellis's statements. I clung to the hope that justice would be on my side, that Maple Creek, my son's legacy, would be protected. But just before the trial, a devastating blow crushed all my hopes. The major newspapers published articles with sensational headlines. "Mother conspires to seize assets with fake will." Alex's videos, The expert reports, everything was twisted into a fabricated story, painting me as a greedy woman trying to steal what wasn't mine. I read those words with a heavy heart. Who did this? Who took my most valuable evidence and turned it into a weapon against me? I knew who was to blame. When I walked into the courtroom on the final day of the trial, I saw Teresa sitting right next to Marcela, a defiant look on her face, with no trace of the younger sister who once hugged me for comfort. I felt my blood run cold, as if the entire world had turned its back on me. Teresa, whom I had trusted more than anyone, was now there, arm in arm with Marcela, as if they were close allies. I wanted to scream, to lunge at her and confront her, but I just stood there, squeezing Camilla's hand, trying to contain the pain that burned in my chest. The trial unfolded like a pre-written play, with each actor performing their role perfectly. Attorney Ramirez did his best, presenting the evidence again, emphasizing that Alex's video was real, that the lab results couldn't be faked. But Attorney Lopez, with that twisted smile of his, stood up and refuted everything one by one with a chilling coldness. "These videos have no legal standing," he said, his voice monotone but sharp. "Anyone could have edited them, and the lab results? There is no concrete evidence linking them to Mrs. Marcela or anyone else." Then he turned to the judge, speaking with utter conviction. "All we have here are the ramblings of a dying man, someone who was no longer in his right mind to make decisions." I bit my lip so hard I tasted the metallic tang of blood. Lopez's words were like knives, not just against me, but against Alex, my son, who had spent his final days defending his legacy. I wanted to stand up, to shout that it was all a lie, that my Alex was always lucid, always careful. But Ramirez placed a hand on my shoulder, gently shaking his head, asking me to remain calm. I looked at Camilla and saw her head bowed, her hands clenched, tears falling silently. I knew she was suffering too. Suffering because they were insulting her father. Suffering because what we were trying to protect was slipping through our fingers. Arthur stood up, his voice filled with authority, as if he were the one deciding everyone's fate. "Your Honor, our family supported Alex for many years. We not only helped him financially, but we were also behind every one of his achievements. Maple Creek is a family asset, not something a stranger like Mrs. Isabel can just take over." His words were like a slap in the face. A stranger? Me, Alex's mother, the one who brought him into the world and raised him, reduced to a stranger in my own son's story. When the judge struck the gavel and officially declared that the inheritance belonged to Marcela, the entire courtroom on their side erupted in applause. I stood motionless, feeling the floor beneath me disappear. Camilla burst into tears, her voice broken with desperation. "No! My dad left everything to my grandma." But her cry was drowned out by the noise in the room. I hugged her tightly against my chest, trying to shield her from the pain that was tearing me apart inside. I couldn't let her see me break down, couldn't let her think it was all over. I dragged my feet out of the courthouse, into a torrential downpour that soaked my clothes and chilled me to the bone. Under the awning of the entrance, Arthur and Eugenia were celebrating, shaking hands with Attorney Lopez. With triumphant smiles they didn't bother to hide. Teresa stood beside them, arm in arm with Eugenia, as if they were old friends, and she shot me a look without a trace of remorse. I bit my lips until they bled and squeezed Camilla's hand, pushing through the crowd of journalists that surrounded us, flashes popping non-stop. They shouted questions, but I heard nothing. I just walked, holding on to Camilla, as if she were the only thing still keeping me upright. That night I returned to the house at Maple Creek, not wanting to go back to my own home in the city. I couldn't face the memories of Alex, couldn't bear the emptiness of the house I once thought was a sanctuary. I sat alone in the darkened room, the yellow lamp in the library now turned off, only shadows covering everything. I was numb, my gaze lost, feeling that everything I had ever trusted had vanished. Alex was gone, his inheritance was stolen, and even Teresa, my sister, had betrayed me. I thought about the years we grew up together, the times she held my hand and promised she would always be by my side. It was all a lie. Suddenly, the phone on the table buzzed, the screen lighting up the darkness. I flinched, my trembling hands picking it up. A message from an unknown number appeared, with just 4 words. "Mom, I'm still alive." I froze. The phone slipped from my hands and hit the floor with a dry clack. My heart was pounding as if it wanted to burst out of my chest. Alex? Could it be? I shook my head, tears streaming, not knowing if they were from hope or fear. Was it really my son, or just a cruel joke from someone who wanted to plunge me even deeper into the abyss? If Alex was alive, why didn't he come back? And if it was true, what terrible truth was still waiting for me? The story you have just heard has had names and places changed to protect the identities of those involved. We don't tell it to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and stop to reflect. How many mothers suffer in silence within their own homes? I truly wonder, if you were in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to stay silent to keep the peace? Or would you dare to face it all to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion, because every story can become a candle that lights the way for another. God always blesses, and I'm convinced that courage will lead us to better days. For now, on the end screen, I'll leave 2 of the channel's most beloved stories. I'm sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.